Hello fellow collectors, I hope you are doing wonderfully well. Today I continue my monthly series where I talk about the best films I watched in the preceding month. Just to repeat what I said at the end of my September video, I was very lucky to be able to have some time away and travel during October, so there isn't a best of October video because I only managed to watch one film the whole month, which is why today we are straight onto November. After all my time away from the UK and from films, I dived right back into things and watched a huge amount during the month, and so I had a lot of great films to choose from to talk about today. And so, without further ado, let's get right into things and talk about the best films I watched in November. First up is the absolute classic, The Great Escape. From 1963 and directed by John Sturges, it features one of the greatest ensemble casts, with Steve McQueen, Richard Attenborough, James Garner, James Coburn, Charles Bronson, Donald Pleasance and David McCallum, among many others. And just as a quick aside, with the sad news of David McCallum's passing earlier this year, who more people might have known as Ducky from NCIS, I learned amazingly that Dr. Dre, his famous song Forget About Dre, sampled David McCallum's song called The Edge. Search it up on YouTube as it's great, and that kind of blew my mind a little bit. Well, I bought this lovely media book edition here while I was in Berlin travelling, and I was very excited to get the chance to watch this one in 4K. I can't actually remember the last time I saw it, but it was many years ago and probably around Christmas time. So I was really glad to get the chance to revisit it, and of course, to no one's surprise, it lived up to my memory and more. What a fantastic film, filled with courage in the face of adversity, the spirit of adventure, steadfast resolve for freedom, and of course a good dose of the British stiff upper lip. The story is well known enough. Set during World War II, a mixed nationality group of prisoners of war in a German prison camp work together to pull off a daring escape. What could be simpler, right? It's based off a book by a real soldier who escaped and his experiences, though I'm sure they used more than a bit of poetic license. But there are more than a few moments in this film which more or less maintains an encouraging tone for the most part, where it brings it back down to earth in terms of sombre realism, and you really get a sense of the cold and brutal reality of the war. Richard Attenborough in particular I thought gave a stellar performance, and I thoroughly enjoyed James Garner here as well. Both the real standouts for me. And what an unforgettable soundtrack and theme tune we have, by Elmer Bernstein, which remains an uplifting and enlivening piece, immediately recognisable even after all these years. Just a brilliant rewatch that I was delighted to see again. Then we have another rewatch for me, and it's Pusher, the first film in what unexpectedly became a trilogy. It's from 1996 and directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, based off a short he made in film school, and it stars Kim Bodnia and a young Mads Mikkelsen actually in his debut film role, as well as Laura Dreisbeck and Zlato Buric, who you might be more familiar with as the eccentric rich guy from the much more recent film Triangle of Sadness. I saw Pusher some years ago, though I forget where exactly, possibly the BFI streaming service or somewhere similar, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and I've wanted to revisit it, as well as check out the other two films since then. Thankfully, Umbrella Entertainment in Australia recently put out this lovely box set, which despite the cost, I simply had to get. Everything in this film works for me. It is dark, gritty, violent and unrelenting. The acting is superb and Kim Bodnia is perfectly cast in his role. It is shot in a very guerrilla style right on the streets of Copenhagen, and it feels very rough and ready. If you are expecting a clean image on the Blu-ray, let me set aside those expectations right now, as the image is very grainy with a lot of noise, and a little reminiscent of kind of what you saw on home videos from the time. And yet that all adds to the nature of this film for me. It just works so well and complements the murky and messy nature of the story. It takes place over the course of a week, and we follow the life of this particular drug dealer, or pusher, as things go from bad to worse, as he tries to manoeuvre his way out of trouble. It is a captivating watch as things start to heat up and the pacing increases, and there is one particular scene where he is running and sprinting as fast as he can, and it feels like this one scene almost captures the essence of what this whole film is about. If you are a fan of Nicholas Winding Refn's films like Drive or Neon Demon, then I can't recommend this enough, as you can go back to his beginning as a director and see the seeds of those later films. Then we have The Young Girls of Rochefort, from 1967 and directed by one of the greats of the French New Wave, Jacques Demy, and starring the beautiful Catherine Deneuve, as well as François Dorlac and Jacques Perron, Michel Piccoli, Grover Dale, Georges Shakiri, and even Gene Kelly himself. This film was glorious. What a dream and what a wonderful ride it was. Going into this one, I was a little hesitant to say the least. I bought the Demy set from Criterion earlier this year, and I dived right into it. However, getting to the umbrellas of Cherbourg kind of stopped me in my tracks. Like many of us, I'm not hugely into musicals, though there are plenty that I really enjoy. But something that I quite dislike is where the music and the singing continues throughout, i.e. where they sing all of their dialogue as well. Well, apparently that's exactly the opposite of Jacques Demy when he made it, who thought having dialogue in between the songs really took you out of the film. And so, despite it standing as good as Umbrellas was, it just wasn't really for me. And going straight into another one of his musical films, well, I just wasn't really quite ready until now. I am glad to say though that this one is in the vein of other musicals and there is plenty of normal dialogue in between the singing as well. A big part of this film is the vibrancy of everything, the set design, the bright and bold colours of the clothes, the wonderful and real village of Cherbourg which plays host to this magnificent film. The dancing, the singing, the joy, the romance. This is a film which really has it all. There's such a life and exuberance in every scene here, with plenty to amuse you as well as plenty to make you start moving your hips as the music is excellent. It just seemed like everyone must have had an absolute blast filming this, and I feel like it undoubtedly inspired La La Land in a lot of ways too. For me, I felt a little bit let down by the last sort of 10 minutes or so, as I felt the end to be, honestly, a little bit rushed maybe, for some reason, and it just didn't quite tie things up as perfectly as I had hoped. But really, I would liken it to a delicious, sweet, creamy and mouth-watering ice cream sundae, just without the cherry on top. So still incredibly good and a really wonderful experience. Then up next we have Smiles of a Summer Night, from 1955 and directed by the legendary Ingmar Bergman, starring some familiar Bergman actors with Gunnar Bjornstrand, Harriet Andersson, Ulla Jacobsen, Eva Dahlbeck, Margit Kalvist and Jarl Kuhler. Getting closer to the end of the year now, I was looking at my 1001 movies list and I was surprised to see I haven't watched anywhere near as many from the list as I would have liked to this year. And so I decided to start trying to tick off a few more that I just sat on my shelves waiting to be watched, which led me to this wonderful film of Bergman's. From Volume 2 of the BFI's Bergman set, Smiles of a Summer Night is a fantastic period comedy, which is really laugh-out-loud funny. There is so much joviality, silliness and witty repartee woven into this story about marriage, affairs, family and love. As you would expect from Bergman, despite the much lighter tone of this film as a whole, there are plenty of deeper moments of existential questioning, religious turmoil and philosophising on the nature of true love. It's a story of mismatches in many ways, one where societal pressure has played its part in pairing those perhaps not best suited, but prideful characters, loose morals and scheming all play their part too. It feels like a film that goes after the bourgeois class, perhaps more akin to something we would expect from Buñuel, but I think Bergman does it to a lesser extent here. Harriet Andersson was a particular favourite here, as she often really is, but the cheekiness, her expressions and general frivolity really cracked me up and I thought she was great. Overall, I just had an absolute blast with this film as a whole, hilarious and just jolly good fun. And lastly, onto some honourable mentions. The first up is the Pemini box set. I had been so interested in picking this one up, as finding, restoring and releasing lost films is really what makes boutiques so special, and this set is the perfect example. I watched 2 out of the 3 films in November from the short-lived Pemini organisation, and I thoroughly enjoyed both of them, so just one more to go. And then next we have a rewatch of Tenet, which I still think is pretty great. And then Dream Scenario, which I was lucky enough to catch at the cinema. And last but not least, we have Hitchcock's Shadow of a Doubt. And that brings us to the end of the video and my November in film. I hope your month was a great one, and I hope your December is going wonderfully as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.